Hey guys, stay patient here. I know I said I was going to take a break, which I am, but I had a few hours spare and there was one video I wanted to bring you sooner rather than later. So I decided to do so before giving my voice the few days rest that it needs. So, Call of Duty, Battlefield, Titanfall, Tomb Raider, Final Fantasy, Watch Dogs. That's right, this year we have sequels on the way for 3 of the biggest multiplayer franchises and 3 of the biggest single-player franchises around today. And with such a jam-packed release schedule, it's easy for some games to get drowned out and forgotten, lost among the crowd as it were. So, in order of their release dates, here are 12 upcoming releases for the PS4 this year that you shouldn't forget about. The BioShock games were some of the best around on last-gen consoles, and I consider Infinite to be my second favourite game of all time. Its story, atmosphere, music, writing, voice acting, everything to do with its presentation is second to none. And with there having been a fair gap between each game, there may be those of you out there that never got round to playing the equally excellent first BioShock, whose setting and atmosphere couldn't be more different. This series needs to be played by everyone, and now you'll have the chance, so no excuses. Buy it, rent it, borrow it, just whatever you do, you must play these masterpieces. You may not have heard of Darkest Dungeon, but if you love the idea of unique and original ideas being incorporated into existing genres, then I suggest you look into it right after this video finishes. It's a roguelike dungeon crawling RPG that certainly stands out visually, but its fascinating hook is that you have to manage your team members' stress levels and resulting psychological states, which have an effect on the battle system as well as their ability to function and survive in this dark and creepy world. It makes for some very tense gameplay, as you can imagine. Many of us console gamers were gutted to hear XCOM 2 was a PC exclusive after Enemy Unknown had been so good last gen and was available on so many platforms to boot. We're finally getting our wish fulfilled though, with XCOM 2 coming to PS4 in just a few weeks. If you're a fan of tactical turn-based games with lots of extra depth in between missions, and you're up for a challenge, definitely get into XCOM if you haven't already. Star Trek Online isn't going to appeal to everyone, I'm sure, and by now it's quite an old game on PC. The console release was brought to my attention recently though, and it sparked my interest despite not being a Trekkie myself. So if you are a fan of Star Trek or MMOs, of which there aren't many on PS4, then this may be exactly what you're looking for from a game. It kind of slipped into the release schedule under my radar, so I figured why not include it here, as I'm sure many of you were unaware of it too. Mafia 2 wasn't quite what I expected. Having never played the original, I set myself up for a sprawling epic that saw you move your way up through the ranks of the Mafia to become Don, my expectations obviously being influenced by the Godfather movies. What it ended up being though was quite a compelling and much more personal story that seems to get more love now in retrospect than it did at the time. Mafia 3 looks to be taking a slightly more over-the-top tongue-in-cheek approach, and it remains to be seen if that will pay off, but it's certainly one to keep an eye on due to the series' impressive pedigree. Did you know that we actually have 2 Final Fantasy games due out this year? And to me, being a slightly older gamer, World of Final Fantasy actually looks more like a Final Fantasy game than 15 does. Don't get me wrong, I'm relatively excited for the main release, if there's more depth to the combat than there was in Episode Dusky, but World of appears to be extremely endearing in a similar way to Ni no Kuni. It's perfect for those of us yearning for a more classic style Final Fantasy game to satisfy our nostalgia, as well as those of you with kids who'd love to introduce them to the type of RPGs you grew up with, using a game that's suitable for both them and you. That's right, The Last Guardian finally has a confirmed release date at the end of October. This game has been keenly anticipated for years, but also dragged out for so long that most of us made peace with the fact that we never expected it to actually arrive. It seemed to have been killed off at one point just to make a triumphant return, and we'll finally be able to play it this year. I will warn you guys though that we should all drastically lower our expectations simply because no game can live up to the kind of hype that builds during such a long development cycle. I'm sure it will be a fun experience, but as of right now it's really up on a pedestal in many gamers' minds, so as long as we can treat it as we would any other game, I'm sure we'll all enjoy it. Friday the 13th the game sounds like a very interesting idea. an asymmetrical 1v4 multiplayer game along the lines of Evolve, where the player controlling Jason Voorhees from the iconic movies has to hunt down the team of 4 camp counselors while their role is to survive. It might not be for everyone, what with how gruesome it's bound to be, and it could go the same way as Evolve if there isn't enough variety, but it certainly looks and sounds intriguing and has received a very positive response from those who've played it. So Dishonored 2 is one of the bigger releases this year, and I wasn't sure whether it really merited a place on this list, as I'm sure none of you guys have forgotten about it, but just in case I wanted to make sure it was still on your radar. The first Dishonored was most people's game of the year in 2012 thanks to its combination of awesome powers and stealth, all set in a very cool steampunk world. It came out of the blue and surprised most of us with how good it was, but if you never got round to playing it, you may not realise the kind of potential Dishonored 2 has. We're looking at a genuine Game of the Year contender here despite how busy this year has been, so don't pass it up. Telltale Games are finally using a new and improved engine, and it'll be interesting to see how they handle the story transition between the end of Series 2 and the start of Series 3, what with Clementine's most recent adventure ending in 2 very different ways depending on the choices you made during the final episode. Whatever happens, you can be confident that the ever-exciting and always unpredictable world of The Walking Dead will present us with even more memorable moments and choices during its 3rd full season. Despite how much you may love the Vita, we can all agree it was basically a flop. One of the games that was a true shining light on the lackluster handheld though was Gravity Rush, which not only made great use of the Vita's control features, but was also just a great game at its core. It earned itself a remaster on PS4, so you can go out and try the original without needing a Vita to set yourself up for the PS4-bound sequel. It will be interesting to see if and how it continues to utilise alternate control methods now that it's only appearing on our home console. Let's hope it lives up to the original while taking it several steps further thanks to the far superior power of the PS4. South Park: The Stick of Truth shocked everyone by giving us a TV tie-in that actually ended up being an awesome RPG. A lot of that was down to the heavy involvement of the show's writers, Matt Stone and Trey Parker, who managed to seamlessly bring the typical South Park humour across to the game. It also helped that Obsidian, the studio behind The Stick of Truth, are very experienced when it comes to role-playing games. They're not actually involved in the sequel though, which is being developed by Ubisoft's own studios, but they have a solid foundation to work from, as well as Matt and Trey to keep things true to the show, so I'm sure they're on to another hilarious winner. There you have it guys, far too many games coming out this year if you ask me, but if you're looking for something slightly different, maybe I've inspired you, and hopefully this video can help ensure those games that aren't Call of Duty or Battlefield are still as highly anticipated as they deserve to be. Fingers crossed that they all fulfill their potential, stay tuned to this channel to find out whether they do, and subscribe for tips videos and trophy guides for some of these games and many more. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you soon.